This video is intended as a guide to teachers who are teaching introductory programming at QEGS. It's a guideline to take Year 7s through the processes involved in making a very basic car racing game in Scratch, and hopefully give you some details of how to extend that and also some in-class activities. As students are fairly new to Scratch, I tend to walk them through the early stages just to give them a feel for some of the controls. So some of the exercises I might demonstrate to them, then give them a few minutes to actually try and do something similar themselves. Independent programming, independent selection of commands comes a little bit later on. So we're going to make a car racing game. We're going to start by deleting the existing sprites and then going to paint new sprite. Now we only need to create a very simple top down, really anything that looks like a car. So for example, we can just use some very simple commands, just some rectangles, some auto shapes. It doesn't really matter if the car ends up a little bit messy or even if the wheels are uneven like they are there, because actually this is going to be very small. We're going to shrink it down after we've put it onto the canvas, so it doesn't really matter if it's a little bit untidy or if it doesn't quite look as neat as it could. So for example, there's the car with the wheels. Let's put in the middle there a driver. We use freehand just to draw, I know, something like a steering wheel, and let's make that orange and change the brush size. That can be his arms coming out holding the steering wheel. As I say, it doesn't have to be totally neat. Oh, I know what we've not done. Let's go back to the rectangle tool and put a kind of a spoiler on the back. And what else can we? Oh, I know what we can do. We can put that. Let's put a white sort of thing on the front, and then use the paintbrush tool again, smallish size. Let's just draw a simple number on the front like that. That'll do. It doesn't have to be anything great, and that's going to be our top-down racer when we actually play. Okay, what I'll probably do at this point is pause just for a second and give the class 5 minutes to replicate what I've just done. Try not to let them get too bogged down with making a fantastic car. Just anything that looks reasonable like a car like that is fine for this stage. So I'll probably give them about 5 minutes at this point. Next thing I'd talk to them about, we've got a car but we haven't got a track. So to get a track, we're going to go to stage and we're going to go to backgrounds and edit, and same again, use the tools very simply just to create a track. So we'll use paintbrush tool again. This time we use a much larger paintbrush, make it grey, might even go a size larger actually to the biggest. Again, don't let them make a track that's too complicated at this stage, because they will have problems later on if they have difficulty getting around it. So something like that is perfectly okay for the time being. Once you've done that, you can click back on sprite 1 and then you can use the shrink sprite tool just to shrink the car right down. That's why it doesn't matter if the car's not mega neat, because we're going to put it down to that sort of size when we're done. So again, probably 3 or 4 minutes now for the class to create a track and a car to go on it. Okay, and that'll be the next exercise. Once we've done that, it's time to get the car to move. So go into scripts. The car at the moment is obviously a static car, so we look at how to get the car going. So we'll bring in some simple scripts. When the green flag is pressed, we're going to get the car to move 10 steps. Now you can demonstrate this, that when you start the game off, the car just moves 10 steps, and it's a pretty rubbish game at the moment. So to make that carry on, we don't just want it to move 10 steps and stops, we want it to keep moving forward. So we get the forever loop and put that inside the forever loop. Now if we look on the screen over here, when we press the green flag, it's just going to start off and fly off towards the edge of the screen. If you move that back, because that forever loop, it just keeps going round and round. So the next thing to do is to put some controls on here. Now there's a number of ways of doing this, but for simplicity's sake we're going to do it like this. So when the left arrow key is pressed, we want the car to turn left. Okay, when the right arrow key is pressed, right arrow, we want the car to turn right. Now common student problems are actually getting the arrows the wrong way around, so when they press the left key it turns right and vice versa. So let's stop the game, let's run it again, and we should be able to use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move the car left and to move the car right. Okay, so the car's moving. Now you might want to say to the students at this point, can anybody tell me how to slow the car down? Hopefully they'll realise that if we change the value of the number of steps we're moving, that will make the car run a little bit slower so it's more steerable. That's still a little bit quick for the actual game, so you'll probably find that 3 is about the right level. So if you change that to 3, you'll have a reasonable compromise there. Now the other problem, of course, and again I'd give the students a few minutes to do that before moving on. Now the other problem, of course, is the car's starting somewhere up here and it doesn't make any difference between the track and the grass. So again, there are more than one way of doing this. You could use a new sprite. I'm going to go back to my stage and I'm going to edit the background. I'm going to put a finish line on, so I'm going to use the line tool. Doesn't really matter what colour you put your finish line, it needs to be a unique colour because we're going to be putting some things together for what happens when it touches it later on. So we're going to say OK, and there's the start finish line. Now obviously we want the car to start, better stop the game. We want the car to start somewhere near the finish line, pointing that way because we're going to go around the track this way. So if you move your cursor to there, let's say, you should be able to see at the bottom right here the coordinates of where the cursor is. So let's say about there. So -200, -14. If we go to the car sprite, move that out of the way, we've got a motion which is go to, and I think we said -200, I think it was -14. But we'll test it anyway. So when we press green, it jumps to there, more or less the right place, and we want it pointing in a particular direction. So this command here, pointing direction 0 for straight up. So again, let's test that. That's more or less where we want it. You could perhaps come a little bit further down, so I don't know, let's try -5, and let's run that. That's going the wrong way. Let's try +5. And then we go in further and further that way. So -10. Oops, sorry, not -10. Let's go -20. See if that comes a little bit further down. That's more or less where we want the race to start. We can put this back on now, and we can test it so that the car's going to start there, and then we steer it using the arrow keys around the track. That would probably be the next exercise that I'd maybe give the students a few minutes to try and replicate. Now also, the next stage is that the car doesn't do anything when it goes over the grass, because at the moment if we run it, it goes at the same speed whether you're on the grass or whether you're on the track, so there's not a lot of point in doing that. So the next stage would be to go to if, and then we can go to sensing and if touching colour. So if touching colour, and we can use the little dropper tool there to choose that green. Now we're moving forward 3 steps at the moment, so we want it to slow down when it touches the grass. Okay, oops, wrong one. So we need to go to motion, move 10 steps, put that in there, and we're going to go, I'm going to set it to -2, just hopefully so we can see the effect. I'm going to drop that into the forever block, and let's see what happens there. So off we go, but if we touch the grass we can see the car slows down till we get back on the track, and it starts going faster, then slows down again, and so on. So if somebody tries to take a shortcut, they're penalised a little bit with going over the grass, the car slows down. Okay, so that's what that little bit of code there does. At this point, that's probably all about all I'd show the students. What I normally get them to do at this stage is get them to do a brainstorm in pairs and ask them how or how they think we could extend that game, and they usually come up with a big long list of answers. I probably give them a minute in pairs, and then I ask each pair to join another pair and select their top one or two ways of improving that game. There's all sorts of things, usually a very long list, from a lap counter to a timer to a two-player game to explosions, and you'll find some worksheets attached also to the OneNote Teacher's Guide, which you can use to actually extend and help students on the code. Okay, try not to give the students full solution, but it'll give you some help in guiding them through. So that's about it. That's the basics of that. I'd share them in class, and then I'd expect them to take that away and extend it themselves.